So this is Point of Reference from The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. Every so often, you hear a new recording by an artist you've been following for a period of time who's breaking strange new ground. It feels odd to hear the work at first. It seems unfamiliar. You have no context for it. You may not be sure you like it. You may even reject it. Still, you're compelled to listen again and again. A new pattern begins to emerge in your brain. What was strange becomes a little more familiar. You start to see how it connects to what came before. It begins to click in your mind, whether you like it or not. And then one day you realize you can't live without it. When a beloved artist thwarts her expectations, or a new artist defies known precedents, it can be confusing. Initially, the work may feel unsatisfying or of no interest whatsoever. Once we get over the hump of adapting ourselves to the new palette, these can end up being our favorite works. Conversely, works we like immediately might not have the same power down the road. The very same phenomenon can happen when making our own work. Oh, that's fascinating. If you're looking for solutions to a problem or a new project to begin, you may react in a strongly negative way to an option that springs forth. This can be when the idea is so new that you don't have any context for it. When we don't have context, new ideas appear foreign or awkward. Sometimes the ideas that least match our expectations are the most innovative. By definition, revolutionary ideas have no context. They invent their own. Wow. When we initially experience the radically new, our first instinct might be to push it away and think, this isn't for me. And sometimes it may not be. Other times, it could lead to our most enduring, important work. Be aware of strong responses. If you're immediately turned off by an experience, it's worth examining why. Powerful reactions often indicate deeper wells of meaning, and perhaps by exploring them, you'll be led to the next step on your creative path. Wow. This is wow. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. So he talks about like listening to new music and how you might not like it right at the beginning. And that makes sense. In high school and college, I found a lot of new music from my sister, and I would listen to it and I wouldn't like it, so I'd ignore it. But then I listened to it a few more times and I started to like it. I think Common Children, I know for sure I didn't like at first, and they were my favorite for a very long time. Did the same happen with Saxon Shore? Oh, that also happened with Sia Rose. I love Sia Rose now. And, back then too. So I feel like that's a common thing that happens, I think. I think people have experienced that. They don't like a band at first and later they do. But I guess the breakthrough that he says is the same thing can happen with your own stuff, which makes sense. If it happens experiencing other people's stuff for the first time, then the first time I make something new, I might not like it either, right? Can I think of an example from my life here where the first time I did something I didn't like it that I made? Well, I guess the first time I streamed, but I feel like that was more of a skill issue or like a match issue. Like I was just what was I streaming? I think my first time I streamed, I was streaming Hearthstone. And now, obviously, I stream coding and reading. I mean, there's definitely things that I've tried and didn't like, and then later I did. If there's something that I made and then I came back to it in the same version, I still liked it. Yes, actually. In 2013, I recorded a whole bunch of music and it was okay. And then I guess listening to it in my later years, I really like the music I recorded that year. I haven't recorded music in a while. I've been busy with other stuff. So yeah, I can confirm that that happens. Where sort of posthumously I've fell in love with some of my own music. Randy says, I like the idea of asking why I don't like something. That's more thoughtful than being reactive. Yeah, especially when it's like a strong reaction, as he says, or powerful reaction. Because sometimes something just doesn't feel like thought out enough. Like if I play two notes on a piano for you, like boing, and then say, "How do you like my piano playing?" I feel like the kind response would be, "Is well, I didn't hear a song yet. I don't hear you playing. There's not much to respond to. You played two notes." Um, Two short ones, in fact, too. So yeah, some things just don't feel uh, fully thought out, and I feel like that's a different kind of response than I don't like it. I guess apathy versus hate, right? Um, I've certainly had strong negative reactions to suggestions for the app from Spouse B that later turned out to be very powerful. Um, I guess in our app we have the why is the simulator not coming up? I mean, we have a tappable map, and I didn't want to do that. Said that's too much work, and now that's like the feature that people love the most, or up there for sure. Like I don't have to find where each stop is, and there's like 472 of them. That's crazy. Randy says, so if it's a lack of context thing, then maybe sometimes what we perceive we don't like might just be a lack of understanding. Yeah, sometimes. I mean, yeah, if someone says they don't like Thai food, I would be curious to hear, where they got it from. If they went to Thailand and didn't like Thai food, then yeah, I guess they don't like Thai food. But uh, if they have some perhaps underdeveloped Thai cuisine and they didn't like it, I'd be like, well, maybe you just didn't have the good stuff. Um, but there's also, like you're saying, an understanding gap too. If you're not familiar with Thai cooking or Asian or Indian cooking or Southeast Asian cooking in general, it can be perhaps startling if the cuisines that you are familiar with don't have crossover. We don't have context. Yeah, so I guess like understanding, like you're saying, and having context is like finding out more about it. Um, I mean, so I guess there's that movie Citizen Kane that people love, and I'm like, this isn't that great. But apparently, in context of film history, it's a great film. um, so perhaps if I learned more about the film history, I would appreciate it more. Perhaps. Yeah. So there's our own work we can appreciate more later too. Randy says, this is very interesting, but hard to understand. I've never thought of this before. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many contexts in the world. Like, the context of programming is kind of what I talk about most here. And I talk about programming in multiple contexts. I talk about it from the perspective of an iOS app, of an Android app, of the server. And even today, we talked about how it's deployed. We talked about, Docker versus Docker Compose versus Kubernetes versus Vagrant. Kind of giving some context to those contexts of programming. And yeah, that's just this stream. There's so many contexts in the world. There's so much I don't know. I've been to all the continents except for Australia, and so I've seen a lot of different contexts around the world, and still there's so much that I don't know. But even here in the US, there's a lot of stuff I don't know too. I feel like I'm familiar with most cuisines, but there's got to be cuisines that I'm not familiar with. Sports, I guess, is another big context. Books, politics. Yeah, it's interesting because in the previous chapter last week, he talked about following the spark of what makes you happy. And this almost feels like the opposite, like having a strong response to be immediately turned off by something. It's like, also be curious about that too. Like, I love developing, I love building stuff, making stuff one step further. So that would be sort of the ecstatic, as he said, for me in the previous chapter. And then this chapter, it's immediately turned off by. And it's worth examining why. What's something that I'm immediately turned off by? I'm not sure if something comes to mind. I feel like I would like to think I'm fairly open-minded and can kind of notice my feelings towards something without having a super strong negative reaction to something new at the moment. But there must be something. I'll have to think about it, or more importantly, I guess, be aware of it for next time. I love how he says this: powerful reactions often indicate deeper wells of meaning, and by exploring them, you'll be led to the next step on your creative path. Yeah, I think the context of where he put this chapter is super important. It was right after he said, follow what makes you happy. And here he's saying, be curious about what you're upset about. Randy says, I think you are more self-aware. You probably ask the why question automatically. I'm not sure if that's true, but I appreciate the positive thoughts. I don't know if I ask the why when I have a negative reaction. I guess usually I notice a negative reaction and just kind of put it aside to receive and listen to what's being presented. And so noticing my negative reactions too, I guess. Instead of putting my negative reactions aside, bringing them with me forward and being curious about them, I think is what this passage would be telling me to do. Which is important, because that's, if I'm just putting it aside, it's not leading me to my most enduring important work. It's not leading me to the next step on my creative path. Because there's the listening chapter from season 4, where he talks about just listening, like the ear is just present in the world. The ear doesn't judge, it just reports what it hears to your brain. So that's kind of the approach I've taken, and having a strong reaction and being curious about that. That's something to keep in mind. Well, to everyone listening on Apple Podcasts and YouTube Podcasts, thanks for sticking around for Living the Creative Act. We read this as part of the live stream every Sunday, where I do live coding, sharing my how I build my apps on Twitch.